This program is brought to you by Emory University.
On March 26, 2013, the Center for Faculty Development and Excellence at Emory University hosted a discussion titled Social Media and Public Scholarship. The panelists examined how platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and blogs can increase the impact of scholarship beyond the academy and how to negotiate the risks of using them. The speakers were Bonna Wescoat, an archaeologist and professor of art history, Rupika Rizam, a graduate student in English at Emory and assistant professor of world literature and English education at Salem State University as of fall 2013, and Shannon Palma, a staff member in the Center for Women at Emory and a PhD alumna in Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. In this video, Professor Wescoat describes how she uses a blog and interactive websites to disseminate information about her research on the Greek island Samothrace.
I feel like an accidental tourist in the world of social media. I was not born to it or raised with it, but I found my way there by virtue of exploring certain issues which in conventional scholarly medium just simply couldn't be expressed. And I thought I might show you a little bit about how I arrived at the value of social media, because I think the next two speakers will actually really engage you more directly in it. But this is my story, so to speak. As Allison said, I'm an archaeologist. I work on the island of Samothrace, which is in the remote north of Greece. And anyhow, it's a magnificent island, and there was a cult there that was very important in the Hellenistic period, known as the cult of the Megillah, the great gods. And it was a mystery cult. Initiation was performed in secrecy, and you were not to reveal what happened. And people didn't. And so we have no real effective records on the nature of the cult. We have only the site and the experience of the site. And fortunately, things are well preserved there, but entirely disassembled. Here are two views of the sanctuary of the great gods. Here from within the sanctuary, looking up at the mountain behind, the sea is in front of you, the mountain behind. And then you're looking as you would as a initiate coming into the sanctuary, and you can see that temple-like structure that you can see with the columns here is very much nestled within a deep ravine. In fact, the sanctuary is defined by ravines and plateaus. This was very important to the nature of the cult. But it is hard to communicate to a viewer. It's hard actually when you're at the site to actually be able to follow the ancient routes because of the erosion and degradation of the site. Here are some tourists who have come right to the place where the arrow is, and the plan that they're handed when they enter the sanctuary says, walk straight on down. But should they do that, they would end up with a leg as damaged as perhaps yours is there, tumbling down this very steep slope and into the gully. If you see the map there, you get some sense of the contour lines. You know you're going down, but it doesn't really communicate very effectively actually how the architects and the cult personnel manipulated the landscape to meet and actually heighten cultic needs. And so being an architectural historian, being very much interested in space and a kinesthetic experience, I thought, well, what are better ways to communicate this idea than we have by just simply the traditional media of drawing plans, drawing elevations, drawing perspective views of individual buildings. These can document places, but they don't really communicate experience. So this became a very important idea to us, and we felt digital modeling was going to be the way that we could further our investigations. And so we began to recreate the sanctuary using sophisticated surveying techniques upon which we then draped the landscape on a kind of wire frame, and then we built up the buildings. And of course we had to study them in great detail in advance of our constructing them. And we arrived at images like the one you see here, which is a snapshot within this three-dimensional model that we created. And here you get much more of a sense of the elevation shifts, but perhaps not still enough of the experience. And this is what we were also after, because knowing so little about the cult, we felt we could at least retrace the steps of the initiate. So what we did was having built the model, and it's not, you have to get to a certain level. You can be tortured by these things. As you'll see, our figures, our sculptures are just cookie cutouts because we tried a lot of different ways of making a bronze sculpture. And curiously, with digital modeling, the closer you get to something that looks real, actually, the further away it becomes from looking real. People then notice how it doesn't have a verisimilitude. So you have to arrive at these balances between communication and verisimilitude. In computer technology, it's called corrosion. When you make things really look like they are, you actually add the corrosion to it. All right, so we had created this model, but we still hadn't communicated experience. So what we did was we set a camera at eye height and traced the path of the initiate. Not just any old path of the initiate, but the path of the initiate on a particular day, the feast of the local saint in our village, and we chose the year 200 BC. And the programs, we were using Lightwave, can actually set the position of the Earth and the position of the stars and the light to be at exactly what it was like at that particular time. It's pretty amazing. And so we chose night because night is when you enter the sanctuary. And here's the full model of the sanctuary as we built it. And the little red arrow is the path you're now going to take through the sanctuary. So we were interested in several passages through the sanctuary. And this is the first, you're entering into the sanctuary. And you stood in this circular area, and certain things happened in advance of your actually going down into the deepest part of the sanctuary. So what we call chthonic experience. You kept entering into the earth. We created a number of these passages, which we actually used as forensic tools to look really carefully at what people could see, how buildings were deployed in the landscape. But again, we can write about this in articles, but how actually to share this part of the actual experience of the videos, and for that a website became important. We set up the samothrace.emory.edu website as a place where we could basically house and make available the videos. Working with graduate students, they said, well, we should also have an interactive plan, and we should also have a virtual gallery of objects from the site. And so we built out this website, basically, being driven by a scholarly need, but then actually being very caught up in the possibility of presenting much more information to a generalized audience, to a general audience. And that general audience ranges from people who are absolutely expert in the field but have never been to Samothrace, or actually haven't seen some things that are unpublished that we put here. But we also were asked by the Carlos Museum if we could connect to their website. They have a really superb education program, and Elizabeth Horner said, we'd like to make it possible for our museum visitors and people who follow the Carlos Museum to be able to click on a link and find out what you're doing at your site during the season. So we have a dig blog, and we're not the only ones. All of the excavations supported by Emory have dig blogs. And so we fire it up when we're there, and everybody makes a contribution, and it's a wide range of things from bathroom spider contest that gets up on the blog. We have spiders that are like this. They just they're the king of the arachnids on that island. But then also it could be how we put back together a building. Kyle Thayer, who made the model, explained how he went from a fragment of stone into a finished piece of a building. And that became a wide-ranging way to communicate on a number of different levels about our work. And again, we don't keep it going constantly. It's one of the things we work on. This is where I feel I could do a bit better, but we do our best. And now things have just sort of taken off for the art history archaeologists. And whenever we begin a project, one of the first things they do is they create a blog for it. And this happened with our Parthenon project in the fall. We got permission from Nashville. You're looking at the Parthenon in Athens and the Parthenon in Nashville. And we got permission from the Parthenon in Nashville to do an experiment, an archaeological experiment, or seminar, on the visibility of the Parthenon frieze. This is a part that doesn't actually exist very well on the building today in Athens, and there's big debates about its visibility. So we recreated panels of it and got a giant lift and put them up in place, and then asked visitors what they saw. And again, the perfect place to disseminate this information is through a blog, through a website. And it immediately is available, and that's probably the most important thing about social media for archaeology. We move slowly. Allison told you about the volume on the Eastern Hill that was coming out this year. Well, I started working on that in 1998. That was excavated in 1960. So we're looking at more than a half of a century between the emergence from the earth and the final publication. That's too long. And one of the things we can now do is, by posting things on the web, we get the word out. It still may take us that long to create the final publication, but you're not shortchanging anyone as much in the process if you make things immediately available. You also let them know what you're doing, and if they're doing something similar, that's a point of opportunity. The other thing that I really appreciate about social media is that we get to showcase our students, and we get to do group projects, and it's really obvious how many people contribute when you actually have a video or a blog. And that's a real, I think, step forward in the world of scholarship, because it often tends to be very solitary.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.